they discussed Jason for like 20 minutes on that podcast.
Right.
And the reason the dates here matter is because this is where false information was going around. At no point had James ever, in any vetting or in speaking with Jason, recording with Jason, anything, or people who were speaking on behalf of Jason saying you should include him, at no point had anyone ever mentioned anything about killing a fucking alien.
And so, you know, we're at this precipice where it's being taken seriously. And we need to get to the facts. We need to sort of stay on this trajectory that stays scientific and fact-based. Because if we go completely off the deep end or into the deep end of this conspiracy space, we lose sight of logic, and we don't know the difference between a charlatan and somebody who's actually representing the truth properly and trying to put us on the right track. And like I said, make America dumb again or make America great again. It's like, choose your path.
Do you think we've already jumped into that deep end though?
Totally.
Yeah.
And there's people that are so invested with their belief system within the UFO community that they will not. And I mean, Jay Weidner discusses this in Dark Alliance. And I've even had people reach out to me post publishing the documentary and been like, why did you even platform Jay Weidner? And I'm like, because he told the truth. He told his experience of being a head of production, producing these TV shows for Gaia Entertainment. And that is a really interesting perspective. People are tuning into that show thinking this is the whole truth and nothing but the truth, right?
Hey guys, if you haven't already subscribed, please hit that subscribe button. It's a huge, huge help. Thank you.
But they're losing sight that they're being entertained on ideas that are theories or just, you know, possibly even science fiction. That's
literal science fiction.
Yeah.
Let's call it what it is.
Yeah. And so that's concerning because the Galactic Federation, where have we heard that before?
Every time I say that out loud, I feel like I lose brain cells.
It hurts. Yeah, some people. Other people get that woo and they're like, so they get like a serotonin rush. They're like, yeah, Galactic Federation, Jean-Luc Picard, the fucking Vulcans. And you know what I mean? Like it's straight up. That's out of Star Trek.
Yeah.
You know, that's what the humans end up becoming. They become part of a galactic federation with, I don't know, the Vulcans are part of it, and eventually the Klingons join, but at one point they're adversaries before that. And, you know, there's all kinds of, I'm trying to think if there's reptilians in there. No, the reptilians are bad, right? Like the reptilians are the Cardassians, basically, these like gray skinned, like badass alien humanoid looking dudes. But okay. And you got the Romulans. Don't leave out the Romulans. So all of these things existed in science fiction before they even worked their way into UFO-tainment. Like the reptilians being bad was launched in the 1960s. Captain Kirk has a physical fight with a reptilian named Zorn.
Yeah, whenever the word reptilian comes out of someone's mouth, they instantly start to lose me. It's like...
It's so funny to see what's going on right now, like in terms of the whistleblowers that are coming forward and then the UFO community that was pre-existing. You know David Icke? British man?
Yes.
He's pissed.
Yeah.
He's pissed because Joe Rogan had Jason Sands on and platformed the idea of reptilians. That was part of the discussion.
Well, he never had me.
Yeah. He's like, this bloody wanker. He's known about me for about 20 bloody years, and I've been talking about the monarchy being reptilians and these reptilians enslaving humanity and our minds and psyche. and he has bloody Jason Sands on. And I like retweeted that because I like, it's brilliant. It's wild. And there's like an old guard in the UFO community that's feeling challenged, right? You see that with Lou.
Yes.
He's somebody that's coming forward and validating a lot of these ideas that existed already in the UFO community. And then you got people like Stephen Greer standing up and being like, he's a disinformation agent. He said he was in counterintelligence. He's hired to like totally take us down the wrong path. And
yeah, the same guy who goes on the Sean Ryan show and says 20 years ago, the CIA offered me $2 billion.
Was it $8 billion?
To whatever it was, $2 billion to go away. And if I didn't take it, they'd kill me. But here I am on the Sean Ryan show 20 years later telling you about it, not live. Like,
he's got a dead man's trigger, that's why.
Come on.
It's all about that dead man's trigger.
Yeah, okay.
They're worried about killing him and then all those files getting released. So that is the old guard challenging the new guard of whistleblowers. But then at the same time, you also have, in my opinion, people that probably mean well, that probably want to push this subject forward.
Mm-hmm.
But in the things that they're saying that are untrue, they're going to make a mockery of this subject, and they're actually going to take us back a few steps.
Yeah, I think that's happened. I think we're past that point. And, you know, I like to look at things on a case-by-case basis. I am very skeptical of things I hear that involve anything like experiences and stuff like that. I mean that in a respectful way. It's just, you know, I know statistically most of those claims, almost all of them, are probably some other explanation. But, you know, with Jason, you haven't had a chance to see the one I did with him yet. But, you know, I didn't know anything about the guy other than the base story he had told on that space or whatever. And I think this is a good time to also clear this up for people. I've put out some videos on X and on Instagram, but there's people who are only watching on YouTube who haven't heard me comment on any of this stuff and what we did with him in episode 267 and even 266 before that with James. But, you know, the reason I did that podcast, I wouldn't have had Jason in alone. I did that podcast because James called me. It was shortly after Christmas. And what had happened was this. He put the Jason Sands being in the program that was going to be coming out, as you already laid out in this conversation, that story came out in April. And you laid out where you came in and started poking holes in the story, and you laid out that you did talk to James and stuff like that. And I remember you mentioning that to me back at the time. But James had been brought this guy by multiple different people, sources that have brought him good stuff in the past. One of them, he did not tell me who they were. One of them, I think he said on Joe Rogan. If people can go fact check this, please go do that. But when they were talking about Jason Sands,
Chris Mellon?
Yes, I believe Chris Mellon.
And I think Chris Mellon means well.
You do?
I think, yeah, totally. I mean, Chris was he went through the ontological shock that David Grush talks about. I've been through the same shit. I told you about in the last interview we did. It's kind of pathetic to even think back, but it's a joke in itself. I'm working a dead-end job as a travel insurance salesman at the age of 20, and I'm coming back from that 9-to-5 soul-sucking job, watching UFO conspiracy videos online, and like not even being able to get to sleep because I'm like, if this is real, everything in reality is a fucking matrix, and we're living a lie. You know, and so Christopher Mellon is in a place of power working for the Pentagon in a defense perspective, and he's being shown credible UAP videos from military and defense, you know, let's say intelligence sources and such. And he's like, holy crap.
Right.
This is real. We need to tell the world. Right. So I think he means well. I hope to speak with him eventually one day in person. I think he's a good guy, but you know,
he's a melon.
He's a melon. And that's another point of contention with Greer, right? Greer goes, the Mellon banker family have enslaved all of humanity or the United
That
States.
seems like a stretch, but
I mean, yeah, it's a little too much. It's a step too far, in my opinion, because prove it.
yeah.
So, yeah, I think we got that
Okay.
out of the way. I think he was one of the people that vetted Jason Sands.
Yeah, I believe that's what James said on that episode with Rogan that came out on Christmas Eve. But here's the context people need to know, because there was false information going around about this on the internet that I also felt compelled to defend James on, because it wasn't fair. James was brought Jason, like James was working on the program for over 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And the documentary was basically done. And then the Jason thing gets brought to him by these people, one of which may have been Chris Mellon. And the story to James right away was like, I don't know about this one. And they're like, we think this happened. And so James made a gut call and was like, all right, these guys brought me good stuff in the past. Fuck it. I'll get them on camera. We'll let people decide. I don't have any problem with that. Now, when his name got leaked by accident, which James explained how that happened, it was actually his fault. He accidentally took a picture where Jay Sands was on the board, like that name.
The slate.
Right. And so when that happens, Jason didn't get mad or anything. He's like, all right, so Jason comes public on this space in April, which is where you came in and asked these questions, and we're like, wait a minute. I'm seeing some shit I don't like here, because it was based on the stuff you were studying with Gaia. So James decides to say fuck it and put him, he had recorded him on camera. We'll include this in the documentary.
Mm-hmm.
Documentary comes out December 16th. The Christmas Eve episode with Joe Rogan, James recorded on the 17th. I know that. He texted the picture to Alessi and I like that day when he was doing that. So I know for a fact he did that.
Yeah.
They discussed Jason for like 20 minutes on that podcast.
Right.
And the reason the dates here matter is because this is where false information was going around. At no point had James ever, in any vetting or in speaking with Jason, recording with Jason, anything, or people who were speaking on behalf of Jason saying you should include him, at no point had anyone ever mentioned anything about killing a fucking alien or intergalactic federations or anything like that.
Crab alien.
Yeah, exactly.
8 foot tall crab aliens in a cave.
So this is now December 16th documentary comes out. December 17th he records with Rogan. December 18th, Jason goes on, I believe it was called Post Disclosure Podcast, and suddenly claims the crab alien thing, which you described earlier.
That's UFO Jesus. Yeah.
Right. And then also goes on Spaces, reiterates this, gets barbecued by some military guys especially. And like you listen to that and you're like, okay, I get it.
Yeah.
And
they're bullying him.
How
dare they bully him? He's a soldier, and that's where people get their backs up and start trying to. And it's like, dude, they're military guys, and they're saying
this is crazy.
Yeah.
Now I'm gonna get to Jason, but with James, now this is where it's my interpretation, because James. One thing about him, and I respect the fuck out of this, when it comes to sources or how he looks at specific things on his opinion, he plays a lot close to the chest, and that is how you should be in that space, and I respect that. So This is my read on it, and Alessi and I have talked about this a bunch. This seems to be both of our reads on it. Alessi goes way back with James, who's making moment of contact with him in 2021.
He was in Brazil.
Right. So I think James felt... I don't know if I want to use the word betrayed, but he definitely felt like
he was misled.
He was misled.
Okay.
This is my opinion. He didn't say this to me, but this is what I think. And he already thought the story was tenuous at best. And once it got to the guys claiming suddenly that he was a part of whacking aliens, James was like, this seems like bullshit. And and he did publicly say this too at the time when that came out on Twitter. He was like, if he did, when someone told him he had claimed this, Jason had claimed this, he said, if that's true, that does really hurt his credibility. So fast forward, all this information's going around where people are saying, James knew about this and decided not to include in his documentary. That's all bullshit. James calls me up shortly after Christmas. He and I had a previously scheduled podcast to do together.
Yeah.
And he floated to me. And by the way, I didn't call him about this Jason Sands stuff, because it's not my job or business to call my friend and be like, whatever.
Nor it is mine.
But I was sitting up at night like, oh, I can't believe this got included in there. Like, fuck. Like, I feel so bad for him. So he calls me up and he says this. I'm like, James, I'm really glad you called me.
Yeah.
because I've been biting my tongue on this. And he goes, yeah, I know why. And he goes, now just hear me out here. You do not have to say yes to this. What would you say about him coming in with me and sink or swim? And I said, let me think about this overnight or whatever. I felt more comfortable that it was James going to be in here with him. And also I felt compelled to give James a chance to be able to be distanced from the story publicly. Like as a friend and for someone who worked so hard to get credibility over so many years.
Yeah.
I felt like that was like a moral obligation.
Yeah.
So that I called him the next.
I know what I saw with, the Phoenix Lights, amazing documentary.
Out of the blue.
Out of the blue. I was a
phenomenon.
kid watching that stuff and was like, oh my God, aliens are real. And, that was probably me crying to sleep before I go to my insurance sales job, right? So thanks, James. But, and then Moment of Contact, the phenomenon, like these are all amazing contributions to, providing evidence that something is going on.
Yes.
Did you know prior to that Jason Sands and Fox interview that like James was going to be like, I'm walking?
No. And here's what I'm going to get to. I called him the next day after he had, that was on a Saturday. I was in the studio when he called me and brought this up. And I said, let me sleep on it. I called him the next day. I said, all right, we'll do it. And I was like, we're just going to do it live like always, which is exactly what it was. I never talked to James again other than texting him for scheduling before that, but before we sat down. James did come into town. That we record on Saturday the 11th. He came into town. I didn't see him. On Friday the 10th, I was actually out of town. And I know he and Jason had a chance to talk, and I thought that was fine. As long as I wasn't a part of it, that's fine.
Yeah.
And again, like he's trying to get his bearings here. So he comes in here. Obviously, we're all great friends. We're having a great time. We chilled for a little while. I got a chance to meet Jason and whatever. And my thought process was, I just want to get to know this guy. I want to know maybe why he could be saying the things he is. Maybe he is just a hardcore pathological liar looking for attention. Maybe there's something more to it. So we sit down, we record, we do the first hour and a half. Most of it is covering the program. We did a little bit where I did have a chance to see the physical records of Jason's military career, which was helpful because it can be like, okay, well.
The DD-214.
Yeah, I guess. So, that was good. But then we took a quick break and I'm like, all right, James, when we go back in there, we're basically just going to go to a story. He's like, great. And that was that. That's what we did. And I said to Jason right before we came in here, I said, Jason, I want you to have the free reign to tell your story. I'm going to pepper you with questions sometimes when it gets to things that are highly controversial. I hope you're okay with that. He's like, yeah, no problem. I said, I'm not sure if this stuff happens, but I want you to have your say. And that was it. So we come in, and I knew nothing, Darcy, about this guy's childhood. Had never heard a damn thing about it. The only thing I'd ever really heard was that space, and then I saw that post-disclosure podcast where he made like the aliens claims or whatever. And the first 36 minutes of episode 267, which was the Jason one, we got deep on his background as a child and the severe trauma that he endured throughout his entire childhood.
Suffered,
yes. And
you wouldn't wish this on your enemy.
That's right. And it was really heavy.
And I feel for him on that.
I did too. And I felt a real kinship to him. And so did James. James was hearing some of this like, whoa, and was relating some of it to his childhood as well. And so even before we got to his military career, where I know there also could be some PTSD things from certain jobs he had that had nothing to do with aliens, by the way, I was like, in my head, I'm going, oh, I think this is making sense now. Now, I'm not a doctor. I make that very, very clear. So there's a line here that I'll stop at. But I have spoken with a lot of people in this studio who are open about having been diagnosed by doctors with PTSD and explaining what that is. And I'm very, very used to tracking that. And Jason said that he has been diagnosed with it by multiple doctors and psychiatrists himself as well on the podcast. So I saw that, and I know some of the symptoms of this because when the guy's talking to you and he gets to even some of the crazy stories, I knew in my head how he had told these, and they line up well, and he didn't talk to you like when someone's talking to you where they're literally making it up as they go. There's a thing. I mean, you've seen it. You're a documentary filmmaker. You interview a lot of people. You can see it. Like when Corey Good's saying his shit, he's a sociopath, and you can see he's fucking making it up. I watched that on video, and I can see that in a deposition. This guy didn't have that. And in my head, we even threw in there, to try to get some background. He talked about they did regressive memory work with him in some of his psychiatry and things like that. And I'm putting it together, and I'm like, I don't think, and I ended up telling them this to his face a little bit on camera and then a lot off camera afterwards. I'm like, I don't think the guy is a liar. I think he is someone who has some severe trauma, has repressed memory syndrome, has things where, and there's medical terms that are above my pay grade here, but maybe some doctors in the comments can help us out. But I've heard about these phenomenons before where people hear stories and they then begin to dissociate and take it on as their own, which could very well explain some of the lore that he is clearly bringing into his story. And to get back to your original question here, just so that we're fully transparent on this whole thing, obviously that one clip, I guess things were happening so fast I didn't really think this through, but that clip went way more viral than I ever would have expected.
Where James says he's like, if you start bringing up killing aliens, that's a total credibility killer.
I gotta leave.
I'm walking.
Right. Yeah. And I just put that like at the end of the first episode to preview the next episode. I'm like, okay, cool. And then like even before the second episode came out, people were like, whoa, like freaking out about it. Now, that was about 2 hours and 20-ish minutes into that second podcast. To answer your question, I had no idea that was coming. There was never a conversation with James before that like certain things were going to be off limits or something like that.
Yeah.
When it happened, now I'm doing this live. I mean, you know how this works in here. I fully understood where James was coming from. I also knew it probably wasn't going to look the best on him. It like people were way harder on him than even I thought they were going to be, as it would turn out. But I knew why James was doing that because he was so concerned about what very serious people would think of him that he's now tied to someone like this. And again, this is just my belief. I think he felt duped by some other people or misled, if you will, and it was like a panic moment. And so I made a call in there to say, okay, we're going to link the post-disclosure interview so people, it's 22 minutes. People can go see it and see what he said. It's all over the internet too. Yeah. And we'll discuss some more things here. And then I made sure to bring it back and editorialize a little bit to try to soften the blow. Now, if there's something I could have done differently there, I could see that. I made a call in the moment and it involved a friend of mine. So there was a little bit of also that going on. But, he didn't leave the room. Right. I didn't know that was going to be happening. I understand where it came from. He probably should have just let it happen. And I think that's fair to say.
Because everybody is like getting super defensive of Jason Sands because of that comment.
Yes.
And they don't understand the context behind it.
That's right.
You've just provided that.
Yes, and that's my hope. And people are still, you know as well as I do, people are religiously still going to believe what they want or claim what they want.
You can't take them out of it.
But at least I can say I've put on the record this is what it is. And again, like if certain things, if James could have handled it a different way and it would have been a little better, that's fair. But to crucify him for it is not fair, especially considering that he really got railroaded online by some people unfairly for claiming that the same people who get upset that things come without evidence from UFO people are perfectly fine providing their own concepts without evidence as well and committing the same sin. And I don't make any distinction between the two. Thank you guys for checking out this clip. If you haven't already subscribed, please subscribe and hit the like button on this video. It is a huge, huge help. And if you'd like to check out this clip's full podcast episode, that link is in the description below or right here. And finally, you can follow me on Instagram and X by using the links in my description below.